free to kind of come and go thing struck me a little strange. And this isn't the first time we've talked about this, I'm pretty sure. But what I found is that the Italians were being brought into Britain from about 1940 or 41 forward, and they had pretty lax rules, and they were pretty willing to go ahead and be laborers for the community. That's kind of how they were, that was their job while they were in the area, so they were doing farm labor. So most of them seemed to be okay with it.
They were probably happy as hell to be out of the war.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, is that there's stuff that you find where there's some who are they'll see on the wall still written "Viva Mussolini," but most of the guys are like, we don't know who wrote that. No, we're totally happy. It's really nice here.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny is that the tone from camp to camp changed, I found in the reading, from about 1943 forward, because the camps that German soldiers were sent to suddenly had a much stronger security on them, and I'm sure that is because the Italians were just these kind of nice guys, but the Germans are demonic, and we can't let them loose. They'll kill the women and children, kind of thing. So I'm sure that this what is this camp's name again?
Long Marston.
Yeah, Long Marston. I'm sure that it was probably one of the ones that didn't have any German or many German POWs.
Probably.
And therefore, they were going out working in the area on farms, and that's how the system kind of got a little loose.
Yeah. Crazy what happens when you start thinking about the fact that soldiers are just like human beings, by and large, like young men who probably are totally cool dudes who just happen to be fighting for the country they happen to be born in, and like don't really have any kind of serious thing against the people they were fighting against.
You know that some of those POWs, the Italians, there was some rule, I want to say it's through the Geneva Convention, but it's probably not, but there was some rule where it became a thing that Italian men, their wives, could emigrate over and live with them in the POW camp so that the family wasn't separated.
Wow.
That was an okay thing. It was common enough that you find it in the writings. It's not as if it was a weirdo one or two off thing.
Yeah.
Again, according to, compared to the experiences of most other POWs,
this
it was
is pretty
pretty
good.
sweet deal.
That were on the being held by the Axis.
Yeah. It should probably be noted too that at that time, 1945. I mean, I think Mussolini was deposed, in 1943. He eventually was rescued by the Germans, and they reconstituted a sort of mini fascist republic in northern Italy when the Germans invaded and took over that part of it. And there was an anti-fascist, anti-Mussolini faction in the southern part. So Italy was in the middle of the Civil War at this time.
Yeah.
It might have been that all of these guys, if not most of them, actually felt no loyalty at all to Mussolini at this point in time.
Well, and I'll just point out that as far as I know, as far as you know, there was no huge crime wave that came of these POWs being in that area. So we can pretty much discount, though we're not in theories, the Italian.
I think so. Although you never know. I mean, there could be outliers in there, but yeah.
True.
Well, in any population,
Yeah.
Do we want to keep talking about Charlie?
No. Let's talk more about Charlie and off the Italians for a while. Let's talk about Charlie. He at this time was working. He didn't have a farm of his own. He was a laborer, but he worked at various farms in the area. And at this time, he had been working at a local farm called the Firs, and he'd been there about 9 months. And his job that day was to clear hedges. So, as you know, in Britain, they've got those hedgerows that sort of separate fields and separate roads from fields and stuff like that. And, of course, with hedges, you want them to grow up, not out. But they, being hedges, they want to grow out. So you got to...
Hedges just don't cooperate.
No, you got to whack them back. And so that's what he was doing. He left his house around 9 a.m., and by the way, his house is still there. You can see pictures of it on the World Wide Web.
Oh, is it?
It is still there, yeah.
I must not have even just made the connection when I saw the picture. Okay.
Yeah, it's still there. It was like 3 interconnected cottages that eventually somebody combined them into one nice big house.
Got it.
But apparently it's
so the structure is still intact. Got it.
Yeah, it's cool. Well, nobody got murdered there. They got murdered somewhere else, thank God. So he headed up in the Firs. There's this thing called Mayon Hill. Although I might be mispronouncing that, it might be Meon, but I think it's Mayon. And so he started clearing hedge.
And this is at 9 o'clock in the morning on Valentine's Day.
Apparently he was seen walking that direction about between 9 and 9:30. He was carrying his walking stick because he had arthritis.
He was like 75, 76?
He was 74. He was
74?
He was born in 1870, so he was 74 and still working. So his birthday was in May of 1870, so this was February, so yeah, he hadn't quite turned 75 yet.
Okay, there you go, yeah.
But, yeah.
So he had his walking stick.
Yeah, got his walking stick because he had Artie, and he also had him with him.
Had what?
Artie.
He just abbreviated arthritis.
You don't be abbreviating arthritis like
okay.
that.
Yeah. Let's see what else he had. He had a pitchfork and he had a slash hook, which were his tools of the trade. And I know you all know what a pitchfork is. If you don't, hold your hand up in front of you with your fingers extended. Now rotate your hand 90 degrees towards your face.
Is it a 2 or 3 prong pitchfork? I never
That
saw
is the question. I mean, most of the ones you see are like 4 prong ones. I saw one on the BBC that was actually a 2 prong pitchfork.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think the older ones were 2 prong.
I believe it was a 2 prong.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, hard to say, but I think it was. As far as a slash hook goes, I've seen pictures of slash hooks, and they come in all different styles. A lot of them are sort of shaped like a sickle, like a curved sickle with a long handle on them.
Kind of a curved knife on one edge and a straight edge on the other.
Yeah, kind of like that.
They're kind of shaped almost like a cowboy boot.
Yeah, and kind of a nice little thing for clearing brush.
No, I know.
Okay, you looked at me funny.
It was just not a way I would have thought to describe it, but it's pretty good.
Okay.
Cowboy boot. Or it looks like Italy. If you grabbed Europe and turned it upside down.
Viva Italia!
Yeah. All right, so yeah, they say that that Italy totally looks like a slash hook. Yeah, and they're totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the slash hook, besides being a great brush clearing tool, would be a great murder weapon.
Apparently.
Yeah, it really would be. And actually, when you think about it, the walking stick that he was carrying and also the pitchfork wouldn't be such bad murder weapons either.
Yeah.
True.
And as it happens, Charlie carried all the murder weapons to the place where he was killed, because it appears that all of them were used on him. And that's what did I say? It was a brutal, horrific murder? Yeah. The last reports of him alive were between about 12 noon and 12:30. And those were by Alfred J. Potter, who managed the furs. Again, that was the farm that Charlie was working on.
Mm-hmm.
And that window isn't firm.
Yeah, no, he changed his time quite a few times.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw it, and it felt like it could have gone all the way out to 1 o'clock, possibly, depending on his version. So
yeah, and so it's a little,
iffy.
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, well, I think one of the ways they sort of fixed it at 1 p.m. because it was concluded later on that the murder probably happened between 1 and 2 p.m. on that day. And he said that he saw him at about 12:30, and it appeared that he had X number of yards of hedge left to clear at that time. Of course, he saw him from like 500 yards away. That's a long ways. But when they actually found his body, about 4 more yards of hedge had been cleared, and it was at Potter's estimate that it would take about half an hour to do that work. So 1 o'clock, kind of works.
And you said he had been working for Potter for how long?
About 9 months, although that's kind of actually that at this time, but he actually had been working for him on and off for about 5 years.
Okay.
Because, Potter had been managing this farm for about 5 years, and so he had lots of experience with Charlie and some of the other local laborers. Apparently he managed it for a company that was owned by his dad.
So it's a family business.
It's a family business, yeah. So sometime around 1 to 2, the population of Lower Clinton dropped from 493 to 492. So that's not a surprise, I guess.
We knew it was coming.
Oh, yeah, we kind of did. Yeah, it's kind of to be expected when you hear the words, witchcraft, murder. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so Edith, you remember Edie, his niece, she was working in a factory, and she got home about 6. And guess what? Charlie wasn't there. And because Charlie was pretty regular in his habits, she became a little bit worried about him. So she went and found her neighbor, a guy named Harry Beasley, and they went looking for Alfred Potter and started looking on the farm for the body. And since Potter was the last guy to see him, and since Potter had a pretty good idea of where he was supposed to be working, they headed out there that direction, and guess what? They found him.
I'm sorry, I'm giggling to myself over here because you primed me to be thinking about Harry Potter. And now you've got Potter and you've got Harry Beasley, which is just kind of like...
That's a good point.
Ron Weasley and Harry Potter. And
Beasley, Harry and Potter. I know, that's a good point.
Okay.
This is where J.K. Rowling got the idea.
Sure.
She just changed the name.
Yeah.
Totally. Oh, and my previous reference when he went off to Warthog School at his adolescence, I totally...
Oh, wait, it was Harry J. Potter. So this is even closer.
Oh, was it? Okay. So, yeah, maybe this is where she got all the names for her books. I don't know. Yeah,
Side quest over.
Sorry.
Back to story.
Sorry.
Back to our story. So it was 6 p.m., after 6 p.m., so it was dark. They took some torches. Presumably by torches, they're talking flashlights and not the kind like you see in Frankenstein movies with the angry villagers and the pitchforks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they found his body, and he was all beaten, and he had been pinned to the ground with his pitchfork. The pitchfork was driven either around his neck or through his neck, depending on the version of the CE here. And so his body, and then the pitchfork itself had been sort of twisted forward and wedged into the hedge that he was working on.
Which is weird.
Yeah, and then, whoever did it might have wanted to expose his throat, because his throat had been you remember I talked about the slash hook?
That's true. It's a good point.
They found the slash hook buried in his throat. And they also found his walking stick nearby with, blood and hair on it, because he'd been beaten with the walking stick also. So yeah, whoever did this really, I don't know what to say about it. They had a good time, or else they were really angry about something.
Yeah, I was going to say, they really worked something out on him.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was the conclusion, actually, the Scotland Yard chap said there was a maniac on the loose.
Of course.
Which is reasonable enough, I guess. It is kind of a maniac kind of murder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, most creepy and ominous of all is a cross had been carved into Charlie's chest.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. And he'd lost a lot of blood, most of his blood, which had drained into the soil. Yeah, there was a lot of blood there. So there was an investigation by Stratford police. Of course, they set the time of death, the forensic examiner did, between 1 and 2 p.m. And they noted that he was missing his pocket watch. He had a fairly cheap tin pocket watch that he carried with him. Robbery is a murder motive? I don't know. And Stratford, of course, as I mentioned earlier, they decided to call in Scotland Yard, and of course Chief Inspector Fabian arrives.
That was 2 days after the murder.
He arrived on the 16th, yeah. Of course, he was all after it. They, besides interviewing everybody in town, and they did interview the entire village, they also called in an RAF plane that had an aerial camera on it, and they photographed the entire village, including the murder scene, just looking for any possible clues.
So what I love about the whole RAF angle is there's some things that you see that say, and the pool of blood around him was so big it could be seen from several hundred feet above in the air.
That's a little hard to believe. I've heard that one too.
Yeah.
I don't think that, I think the blood would soak into the ground before it would spread big enough to be seen.
Yes.
Hundreds of feet in the air.
I would agree with this.
Yeah.
Unless, extreme drought.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But, yeah, it was mid-February,
White
so I'm
ground.
kind of doubting that.
And it's, England, so.
No, yeah.
Really doubting that.
Kind of, yeah. What else? They had a ground search, local police, and I think they were assisted by military in this. And the military came in with metal detectors and everything because they were looking for the watch. Yeah.
Because that was their only lead.
They didn't have much to go on here, and yeah, the watch maybe they were hoping possibly they could get a fingerprint or two off of it, but they never found it. There are reports that the watch was found like 15 years later, when they were tearing down the outhouses at the cottage where Edie and Charlie were living. Supposedly they found the watch in the outhouse, although I've heard that that's also not entirely confirmed. But
also, it feels like it'd be hard to confirm it was his. If it was a fairly generic, just tin
run-of-the-mill
watch.
Yeah.
He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would have it monogrammed or anything like that. So.
No, it actually had been monogrammed, but he had bought it used, so it had somebody else's name in it. And so it could have been positively identified as his, because it did have another guy's name in it. But again, Charlie was not a rich guy, not at all. The closest he came to wealth, which was not much, is when his wife died in 1927. She left him about 300 pounds.
Yeah, just under.
Yeah, about 297, and which he put in the bank. And by the time of his death, I think it was down to about 11 pounds.
So So it wasn't as if he was living lavish.
Yeah.
Oh, no, not at all.
No, because it was 1927. He lived on that almost 300 pounds for nearly 20 years.
Well, yeah, I'm sure he just pulled it out for, extra expenses, emergencies,
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, or if
Christmas
Edie
present.
needed something. Or
Or work is slow, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, that's what a savings account is for.
Totally, but for the most part, I don't think he needed it. He worked all the time, and so he usually can support himself okay. Now, quickly, let's a quick look at the autopsy. When they examined him, they found that his trachea had been cut. That's
Shocking.
your windpipe. Yeah, not surprising. He also had broken ribs and bruises on his chest, presumably from the walking stick, because he had sustained blows to the head, which were matched to the walking stick. So the broken ribs and stuff could have also come from the walking stick or one of the other weapons.
Or somebody just punching him. He's a 75-year-old man. He's not as if he's got super
who's
strong
worked
bones.
his whole life. I mean, not lived an easy life.
Yeah.
No, he was probably tougher than he looked.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. He also had some defensive wounds. He had a cut in his left hand. He had extensive bruising on his right arm and hand. And so he was obviously trying to fend off whoever was attacking him. Mm-hmm. He didn't quite succeed. And also his shirt had been opened and his fly had been unbuttoned.
Makes no sense. Okay.
No, not really.
Oh, no. He was wearing pants that had a button fly.
Yeah.
I've had pants that have come undone when I'm working. If you're twisting and turning, I could maybe see that. Shirt, I can maybe see if he was hot. He's sweaty from working.
He was working. Yeah, I mean, he could have unbuttoned his shirt. It might be he didn't even button it to begin with when he left that day.
Well, I thought it was a cool day. Wasn't it? I mean, it was January or February.
But he was also wearing a jacket when he was found, and so
was he?
Yeah.
It's hard to cut across in someone's chest when their shirt is buttoned. I'll just say.
True.
It's a good point. Yeah,
Button
I thought about that.
And to the unbuttoned pants, I guess, is it not possible that his attacker came upon him when he was
urinating?
Yeah.
Well, I was about to suggest that. I know that when I choose to jump somebody and murder them, I usually wait till they're at their most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most vulnerable states in life.
That's a great time to do it, yeah. And so, I know. I'm not exactly, your great, courageous warrior here. I admit it. I'll go for every advantage I can.
Yeah.
The local police also clued Fabian of the Yard in on some other interesting local lore that they seem to feel might have some bearing on this case. And certainly, it did have, if it had no bearing on the case, it certainly influenced the public perception of it.
Oh, I would say that's the only thing that it really did.
Yeah, as far as whether this provided him with any sort of a roadmap to solve the killing, well, not really. But the first thing is he clued him in on, that's Fabian, clued him in on murder that had happened in 1875, which is like, 80 years before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A ways before. 70 years, 80 years, I don't know. Of a woman named Ann Tennant. Although I've seen, in one account I saw her name as Ann Turner. But everywhere else is Ann Tennant, so I think Tennant is the correct name.
We'll go with it.
Yeah, she had been murdered under identical circumstances.
In the same space?
Nearby, but not in the same field or anything like that. But she'd been
area.
Yeah, pinned to the ground with a pitchfork, and then her throat was slashed with the sign of the cross. Then she was
with a bill hook.
Yeah, with a bill hook. She was killed by a guy named James Haywood. And he said that he did it because she was a witch, and she was trying to save the village from this witch.
He was trying to save the village from her. Okay.
Yeah. Did I say she?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry. But he was found guilty. That's James Haywood, and he was hanged.
That's because there were people around.
Well, there were neighbors there. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was intoxicated, if I remember correctly.
He had some alcoholic cider.
He had been drinking,
and he apparently was also considered slow-witted.
That was what the locals called.
Considered kind of,
not all there.
Not really, yeah. So that's the one story. And then a book by a guy named the Reverend James Harvey Bloom. In this book, he gave an account of a young Charles Walton in 1885. And he tells, in the tale of this, he was a young farm laborer, and he was heading home one night, and he met a large sort of spectral black dog on the road, heading home. And then the next night he met the dog again. And then on the third night, You saw the dog yet again, but this time there was a headless woman walking with the dog.
Ooh.
I know. So, yeah, I know. So Charles didn't think anything of it at the time. I was just kidding. I'm sure he did. But then later that night when he got home, he found out that his sister had died. And also, by the way, in another version of this that I've seen out there, he actually saw the dog 9 nights in a row.
Okay, I was to say, I thought it was 7, but yeah. There's varying lengths.
There are, yeah. Apparently, it turns out the black dog in local lore is a harbinger of death.
Yeah.
You see one of these scary, creepy black dogs, and that's